Careers are markets, every skill's a stock. Some rise like rockets, some die on the dock. Future's getting priced in faster every day. You either own the wave or get washed away.
Inspired you to do it. And yeah, hey mate, we just started recording, so really it's just about kicking a tithe and just really just going through what you've created, mate. I think it's very good, and just maybe want a bit more detail as to why you created it, and then we just kick the tithe about what we're going to do next, or what we could do next, and how we can hype you up, really.
Sure, thanks mate. So I think it came about, the idea of building a tracker specifically around job loss and layoffs has been fascinating to me for quite some time, in the sense, because having had like worked in the city for a number of years and experienced a lot of redundancies, and well, I hadn't experienced them personally, but having to go through and see those with candidates, cancelling contractors contracts because of changes to market conditions, money, etc. And seeing that kind of impact on people has never left me. I vividly remember being quite young, going to Lehman Brothers when all that kicked off in 08, and meeting people with boxes.
Yeah.
And being a young guy, I was like, wow, these people are older than me with kids, families, and I just couldn't help but think, wow. I mean, yes, they were on a lot of money at the time, but the market conditions didn't mean that necessarily they would be back in a lot of money very quickly. And some of them were, and some of them weren't, and some of them had to change careers entirely. And that's never kind of left me. And as we've moved into this new phase where I've kind of left my old business, and the first thing I thought of was I'd been to an event with Accenture. And one of the key questions, first of all, I'd been to an event with Accenture to do an AI workshop about the impact of AI and its technologies in the workplace. And there was so many gaps that I could see in terms of what was being discussed, not necessarily from those individuals, but what they had identified from the kind of overall market. And I think it's coming on to 12 months ago. And then the follow-up event, in terms of having that research discussed, was fascinating, where everybody put their hand up to ask the same question, which was, what jobs are most at risk from AI?
Yeah.
And because initially, when the AI discussion was having about, Gary, most people assumed it'd be the blue collar work. Most people assumed it would impact kind of really low level stuff, and some of it's come to pass in terms of like customer services, or let's not say it's low level, more mundane, more automatable. But there are now clear risks to people's livelihoods that sit well above the kind of like value chain, let's say, in the workspace, middle managers, and obviously the grad compression. And it led to this discussion where I was like, well, clearly there's a big question here that no one has the answer for, which is, which jobs are safe, which jobs aren't, how are they getting impacted? And there was no real place to look at. Now, there is obviously a layoffs tracker out there called layoffs.fyi, which is really, really good. This guy's been doing it for quite some time. I'd been using it, not before I'd thinking this idea, just to sort of see the pulse of the market. But what I thought was, actually, I'll just make mine very acute to AI impact, or AI attributed layoffs, and try and put more of an editorial lens in it. So if I share my screen with you, I'll show you what I mean. So
got it.
Right. So at the moment, this is last announcement was kind of June made, as you can see here. I've kind of taken a view of making sure the entries are just editorially rated.
Yeah.
And I've got a bit of a system on that, which I can talk to you about. And I've put claims in and the sources within it. So if anybody's interested in sort of looking in a bit more detail on this, they can see it. But headline news is there's just over 91,000 AI attributed jobs tracked, which is a hell of a lot of people that's been impacted here since January. So this is just the first 6 months. Now, knowing that I was going to come on to talk about this, what I wish I'd done was come prepared with historical figures and how that's relative to previous rates before AI, right? But that's what we're looking at this stage in time. And of those, I've got a confirmed amount of about 48,310. that CEO or company press or interviews have directly named AI as the reason.
Yeah.
Which I think is important, because I think a lot of people can attribute or associate AI to layoffs, but we all know, I mean, some of the discussion in Discord you can see on things like LinkedIn where people are posting about these things. Yes, quite rightly so. There should be other things sort of concerned around this, right? Notwithstanding over hiring due to COVID, over hiring because this, that, and the other, nearshoring, other budgetary concerns, market conditions. It's not necessarily AI, and AI is a very comfortable scapegoat, in my opinion, sometimes. And you can see it's almost balanced here, Gary, probable 43,166 AI cited alongside other factors. But in essence, there's tracking just 27 companies at this stage, which looks to be growing. Largest single cut is 20,000 from Oracle. Now, I'd caveat this by saying this is a midpoint, because what they've said is a range of numbers here, and what the actual number is going to be confirmed will come to fruition a little bit later. An average workforce of those layoffs is about 16%, which is massive.
Yeah, I'd say. Good.
And so we've done it by months, and then the other thing is I've just allowed some emerging signals and counter signals, which I think is really, really critical and important. So before I go on, man, was there anything you wanted to sort of
scroll up a bit and look at the months? Let's look at the months. So if we think about reporting schedules, so I haven't got to hand the exact reporting schedules, but certainly there, if you look at the Jan and the May, they normally indicate Jan, February, May, that actually maybe they're on a kind of that kind of schedule where you might expect to see a big amount in August at the same time, and then September. Kind of like we're in a kind of narrative world at the moment where there are no truths or untruths, there's just narratives. And that sounds a bit cynical, but if we look at what's happening in the world now about naming names, you could literally see a picture of something, something bad happened to someone, and someone says, oh, well, that didn't really happen. You're like, well, it did. Oh, yeah, it did happen, but it happened for this reason, or we're doing it for this. And what is called a blatant lie in the old days, but it's now just called a narrative. So I think here, the question is, when do the narratives run out on AI? And we were talking about this earlier. This is kind of indicating, if I was to do some sort of mapping, I would expect August again to be a pretty sizable month in terms of your charts, in terms of AI attribution. And then maybe again November or December to kind of go over the top, say, yeah, we've made it, and then maybe see a drop off next year.
Yeah, I think you might be right, and well, that should be the prediction based on the data alone. But the narrative positioning is interesting, right? We can see there's already a bit of a not reverse. I mean, like Uber, for instance, is a very good example here. If I jump on ahead here,
please,
onto Tracker. In fact, I left Uber off because of this reason, because Uber as a case, this is the tracker itself, which you can get into, but Uber itself was, positionally speaking, talking about how it's seen obvious areas of opportunities where AI could do a lot of the automation. Yeah. Notwithstanding, this is outside of just the drivers of the fleets, right? Where you're looking at autonomous vehicles. Now, obviously, from a regulatory and legislative and safety point of view, you can't land grab all these areas geographically speaking, but in-house base wise, from a software development point of view, could be support, whatever it might be, operations, there were obvious areas that they had identified. I'm paraphrasing here, but what they said was, look, we can make some significant gains here using automation and technology, and they were implying already job impact then.
Yeah.
Fast forward to this year, it's been notably reported where they've killed their year's token consumption in 4 months.
Yeah.
And now they've let off, I can't remember the numbers of people, which is it won't be a small amount, but they've been very, very at pains to say it's due to the complexity, and there was another word. But basically, they spouted a 4-sentence paragraph about the reasoning, but AI wasn't it? So I think what's interesting, although your hunch, mate, here is something I totally agree with in terms of how the data might run as a periodic cycle, 3 months, 3 months, 3 months, 3 months. I wouldn't be surprised if we actually saw more orange than green, because I think, people aren't stupid. They're seeing the sentiment and the backlash, let's call it, of AI. Notwithstanding things like the booing from Eric Schmidt's commencement speech and all that sort of stuff. People are conflating AI as the main reason of their woes when it comes to the sort of job side, and I think they're trying to not moonwalk, but be very cautious about what they are now allowing that to happen. And I think that started off when Jensen basically said, "Hey, listen, anybody that just says AI is causing all this is lazy." And look, mate, look all the timing, all the IPOs that they're getting announced. And,
totally. They've got to get it out the door because they are running out a bit of cash, but also of commentary, positive commentary. So I think the commentary tide has turned against them. And if you look at some of the actions, the Uber action's interesting, because you say that probably being quoted, and I've heard it, probably read about 10 articles a day, maybe even more than that, and then listen to about 5 podcasts, and that might appear in every 2 of them, in 2 out of the 15 on the daily basis. So clearly they wanted to get it out there. And similarly, that one, then there's obviously Microsoft, which it kind of kept secret but didn't keep secret, and then the 500 million, which people believe is Amazon, allegedly.
Wow.
So I think they're grappling with the fact that, and this comes back to where it's important for you, and this is that HR was always more difficult than people made it. And so if I'm going to replace any capital in the UK or in Europe with capital in India or Manila or whatever, it's difficult. If I'm going to replace that with technology, it's difficult, because to do it, I had to know what the person was really doing. And that's not something most companies do. And I've got this kind of angle that I'm basically, it's my kind of to wind people up on LinkedIn. So I've got a couple of angles. I'm going to use the word token a lot and make kind of portmanteaus of token, like you saw yesterday, token anxiety, which someone absolutely hated. That was good. Basically,
you got a rise, did you?
Yeah, properly, yeah. But the idea is that you're replacing something which is only known because we've had 130, 40, 50 years of it in industrial sense, employment, with something that is unknown and it's clearly going to be run by an oligopoly. Even if there are 8 firms that are able to provide the same model, that would be like 8 recruiting firms or 8 BPOs in the whole world. And those are the only 8 you can actually deal with. That would be a problem for HR or for anybody CEO. Wait a minute, there's only 8 BPOs and they're the only people supplying employment in the whole world. That would be a problem. Yeah. And so when you say that out loud, people are like, oh, but it's obvious. Any basic economics 101, if you've got 8 providers, then you're in a world of pain. And they're not realizing that. And so in many ways, I think it looks like a bad time for HR. And I listen to Josh and other people in the HR space being laid off, HR being laid off because people are, oh, we don't need them. Almost like the customer service. But in many ways, it would be the revelation of what HR and human capital actually ever did. Because the integration of these tools is going to be a nightmare. Just like the integration of people is a nightmare. But it was a solved-ish problem with a kind of like 30% attrition. I think you're going to have probably high attrition, just like we had in the early days of HR. But now you have no one else to blame.
So a few points to unpack there, right? So the oligarchy principle was interesting. As a famous comedian said this, isn't it? You walk into a supermarket, see 27 different types of bagels, and you think you've got the illusion of choice. But when the things that really matter, like political party choices, right? This is not a political conversation, but you've only got a choice of 2. Oil companies, energy companies, airlines. They are largely concentrated amongst an elite group of powerful entities, right? That basically can charge what they want, and AI is going to be the same. So I'm in agreement with you on that side. And we talk about free markets, but there's so much propaganda and a pushback on, using models from China because of this, that, and the other, right? Whereas, you see how they're running things.
Yeah.
Open source, very regulated for the positive state impact. They've already made AI layoffs as an attribution illegal. They've kind of outlawed that piece as well, and they're making headways in a lot of AI advancements that can help society. So, that control element is really interesting. On the integration of tools, just expand what you mean on that for me.
Yeah. So say you had, let's just take the two, because we're essentially swapping capital for capital. So we've, in the early noughties, we swapped capital in, as you say, near shore, Jersey Shore, whatever, for far shore or whatever. And that was just a capital swap. So in that implicitly was someone saying, you know what? I've got capital in the UK or US somewhere in California or London, and it's, say, 1. I think, or say 100. I think I can basically get 4 lots of capital, sometimes 5 back in the day, but they say 3 to 5. So 4 lots of capital of 25 each, actually no, of 15 each, and they're going to basically be replacing that 1 bit of capital I had before. And if I run a number that's even better than that, that's a bad example. The numbers were roughly, when I looked the last time when we were doing it, it was 1 versus eventual end cost of 0.3. And so even if it required 5 people to get to the 0.3 or whatever, then that's it. The total cost of Gary cost 100. I'm going to get 5 people and they're going to cost 30. Main cost 100. I'm going to get 5 people, 4 people, and they're going to cost 30. So then if you now say you throw AI into that mix, you say, okay, AI is saying the same thing. AI is saying, well, actually, your cost base was 30. Actually, I can do it for 10. But when I was moving stuff to India, I knew there was a whole infrastructure around that. There will be people who are smarter than me who are doing that integration from a HC perspective, from an onboard perspective, from a tooling perspective, from the whole lot. And that persists even today with GCCs. The question is, who's going to do that for the new tooling? So now HR being decimated, okay. And then we're going to decimate the BPOs, okay. We're going to eviscerate the BPOs as well, okay. Who's going to do that onboarding? Because essentially we're onboarding, if you believe that digital worker, we're onboarding digital workers, which means, yeah, they don't have the cultural issues, but they actually still do, because they actually have, how do I introduce this into my system with the mistakes and the fail-safes and the redundancy and the whole lot. And that's where people are starting to struggle. And I listened to some of the kind of real techie guys saying, well, the context and this and the harness and all sorts of crazy terms that no one really understands. But they're basically saying culturally, it's hard to bring this into our system because our system was always chaotic. And we transported chaos in the UK and America, and we transported that chaos to India, Manila, whatever. That's fine, still manage chaos. But when you don't have anybody to kind of manage that chaos, and it's just, does the tool work? Well, the tool has.
So that's why we're seeing a boomerang, right, of some quiet rehiring, as foresters and whatnot have sort of cited with some of the firms. I mean, there's definitely a buyer's remorse in a lot of what's happening, right? People are investing in their capital on AI, hedging on that, then starting with not hiring for key roles, and then actually going further to go, we're going to cut this staff, and then realize, shit, AES tokens have cost less, but we're using more tokens, so actually our overall bill is huge. I mean, I was talking to a guy yesterday, mate, who had their Claude Enterprise subscription stopped because they were just maxing all the time.
I don't feel
You know, so, and it's interesting, and you talk about this a lot in the sense of it's bound to happen, isn't it? If something's cheaper, you think, oh, I've got more to use, and people don't realize quite what I mean, because they go, all right, new frontier model. You mean Opus 4.8 already was a huge guzzler. Yeah. And now I haven't tried Fable 5, but I imagine that's not going to be something that's going to get you many miles to the gallon, right?
Yeah.
So there's all these elements that come to it. But this is when you're doing the integration piece, this is what I think that forward deployment engineer will transition into, where you're going to have a subsidiary of that, where they're going to manage these these pieces, mate, because I really do think we're going to end up in a really weird place, mate, where there's going to be an AI agent that manages an element of. So if you're a job seeker, for instance, they're going to manage your that whole process for you, right?
Yes, to a degree, yeah.
And that agent is going to interface with another agent on the company side, because one thing about the EU AI Act is it very specifically about biases with technology with humans.
Yeah.
Nothing about AI to AI, mate.
Yes, true.
So I think people are going to slowly realize and understand that opportunity and create bots of that ilk. Now, whether they can cohabit and work in the way that I mean, this might be a small deviation to the point you're trying to say, which is, look, we had this managed chaos before, but we had humans to deal with it. You get rid of humans, you're introducing these bots in there, it's just gonna implode, and that could be quite right too. But I think, you know, the rule book is going to be thrown out the door a little bit, because there are none of the historical elements where they go, there's all these people to consider beforehand. We're just really sort of dealing with bots now. Actually, why don't we greenfield this? How do we take a fresh approach into introducing this landscape? There's going to be a lot of pain, obviously.
Yeah, but maybe if we take HR, similarly customer service, they both get a good kick in. But in many ways, SaaS companies also get a good kick in terms of the products.
Yeah,
I was looking, I've kind of go down the last couple of years the rabbit hole of Salesforce, and we had Salesforce briefly at Standard Bank, but not really.
Could you use it?
Yeah, not nowhere near as much, because the sales wasn't really the same sort of like go outside and just like Glenn Ross sort of thing. But
I miss those days, mate.
You know, if you think about what those products actually do, and those products have been trying to express this really badly, so I'll give it a go again. In the sense that me and you start a company, and it starts with two people. We don't need any SOPs, any standard operating procedures. We just kind of like vibe it between us.
Yeah.
Then we have another 10 people. Similarly, we're kind of two pizzas. We're in a room. It's cool. If we're global, it's a bit more different. You got to vibe it, Slack or whatever. That moves to 120. It starts to creak a little bit. You start to have to start calling people managers and supervisors and stuff, even though you didn't want to.
Hierarchies, it gets established. Yeah.
10x that, 1,200, 12,000. Now, essentially, it's a culture thing. I think I've heard a lot of people talk about culture. To a large degree, I think it's bollocks, but because essentially there's never been one monoculture, but there's been these set of rules of what a kind of tribalism is. In doesn't matter what color you are, what ethnicity. This is a tribalism of Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley and blah blah blah, or Man U football team or whatever. This is a tribalism in the way that we operate. You can call it culture if you want. So I think these systems basically enable these companies to grow, not because they were necessarily brilliant systems, but they imposed a operating procedure on someone, similar to where we're on now, Substack. Now, whether we like it or not, it's an imposed operating system on the way that we're going to record. We can't just freestyle it. I think I could add a producer in if I really wanted to. I think I could add in some bits across the screen, but I can't make it into a full like Sky TV, which I can do on OBS, which is this outsourced thing that most of the broadcasters who are not in a big studio use. And it's really good. I've used it. It's technically difficult to learn, and I think I could, I'd have to spend another 50 hours learning it properly. And it would be good. I'd be literally broadcasting like Sky TV from my home. But what we're recording now has an SOP, and it says, we want you to record in this format. We want it to be kind of vibed, live-ish, and really it's a source of virality. It's not for like this mega broadcasting, and it's not for you to be a homebody CNBC or Bloomberg. And so all of these apps imposed an operating system on people. And so when I had 12,000 salesmen running around, I worried a little bit, but didn't have to worry that much, because the system would coalesce them around a bunch of Mickey Mouse rules that I didn't have to write into SOPs, because they couldn't get their stuff into the system. They couldn't get into the system, they couldn't get paid. And so all of these tools were standard operating procedures that masked themselves as apps, as productivity and growth and stuff, but really they were in the absence of you basically having the most dictatorial culture and senior prefects running around the firm. Basically, we forced people into a corner. And I think HR did that to a degree, which they're starting to understand, some firms maybe, like Klarna and stuff. And other firms are like, no, we can get rid of them, who will have problems down the line, but then maybe 2, 3, 4 years.
So the older world that you and I come from, was, not to oversimplify it, but the reason why there's a lack of SOPs in place, because we were motivated by incentives, right? You talk about sales staff, right? It's quite simple. If you want them to behave in a certain way, you attack them what their value is the most, which is revenue numbers, and eventually it's pay packet.
Yeah.
And guess what? You ask them to jump, they'll just simply ask how high. You don't need to give them a document to go, have you read this and signed?
Here's how you jump, yeah.
Right. But yeah, exactly. I've never really thought about apps like this as a way of getting that kind of confirmation. But I guess you're right. Well, we're limited to what this enables us to do. I'd rather share screen so I could still see your face and talk to you, as opposed to this system which is just sharing screen and seeing the page. But you have to work in and around the way the technology, I guess works. But I still don't see how, because I think actually the integration of these tools, notwithstanding the technical aspects of it, because I'm not technical, so I don't want to undermine that, is going to be as difficult, unless it's because specifically it's due to the lack of people. Because if it's so defined, surely you understand where I'm oversimplifying this, right?
See, I don't think they're, even with the SOPs, they're defined-ish. Just like SAP is a good example. SAP is this big financial system that many, whether it be a bank or your Walmart or whatever, will use a heavy ERP system, which have only been around since, I don't know, late 80s, enterprise resource planning. And they would allow it to be, this comes back to the FDE, they had a concept of how it should look, and you've seen it in work somewhere. They would allow you to configure it. And then you'd get in essentially solution engineers, which are the new FDEs back in the 90s, noughties, and they would configure it to you. But the problem is, man, is that people didn't know what they want configured in the first place. Because you were giving me a Formula One car, give you and I a Formula One car, and I don't know whether I'm oversteer or understeer. I've never driven that fast.
Sure. Yeah.
And so therefore, we both got to learn that, for one. We've both got to learn how well we corner. We've got to learn, and we've really got to tailor that car to you individually, not just some bloke who's 5'10" or whatever. No, it's got to be literally your second skin. And that's most of those systems, and they were configured in that way. So if you extrapolate that over a number of different apps, who are they being molded to? And who is being forced to use them in that mold? Because if you and I are both in the same firm and we can both vibe code stuff, I ain't using your shit. I ain't using your spreadsheet. I'm going to do my own. And so I think the condition of the ERP, the PeopleSoft, the Gustos, all of these were really about control, command and control. And I think firms have forgotten that that's all they were, because anybody could replace the SAP tool. It was decent, but it could replace it. Anybody could replace Salesforce. There's like 100 different CRMs out there. But the command and control around Salesforce is pretty good. And so I think that would be the problem when you introduce all these new apps.
But I think conversely, though, because of vibe coding and the look, whether we believe software engineering is dead or not, I mean, I conversely, it's so funny. You read, depending on which day it is, there's never been a higher demand, or it's the end of times on this. As you know, I've been deep in the rabbit hole myself with these tools, vibe coding and things like that. I've never written a line of code in my life, but I'm using Terminal as an app more than probably Outlook, more than Gmail, right? Certainly more than any other ATS I've ever used or a CRM. And so that tells you the way that we're moving towards. Now, I may be a bit of an anomaly, because I'm obviously trying to build something for myself, But companies that are investing in these areas, right? I don't know what their token consumption is and what they're specifically using it for. But the idea of not needing to buy a hugely overpriced SaaS product is incentivizing, where you can go, actually, you know, because you know what the sales process is. You talk to someone from a rep from Workday or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Let's use Workday because that's a very good example, because they lost their CTO who went to join Anthropic.
Yeah, I know what that,
And when that happened, I read that and instantly thought, well, that means to me, not Workday's done, but that means to me, Workday's value is changing, because the person that understood Workday's technology also understands its weaknesses and its fragilities, and why candidates will very, very publicly lambast their experience on this. And they can take all those key learns, move to a frontier model, and join as a technical person, not someone senior, and help drive better ways to create better products. Mate, it wouldn't surprise me if one day you turn up on Artifacts free and you see some sort of like Workday foundational piece that someone could just take, jump into their own system and amend as appropriate and bespoke it to Gary and Mann's new company. And it does exactly what it needed to be. And I see that as a really interesting opportunity here, where the integration of tools doesn't necessarily mean in the way that it's not like, oh, I've got to take Murex FX module and integrate it with your existing FX piece here in this bank now. It's like, actually, we don't like what Murex does. I'm gonna look at it and go, what do I like about it? What do I need it for? And create my own.
So if you come back to if you pull up your finger, I'm going to kind of try to draw you back into kind of what I mean by your displaced. If you pull up your displaced again.
Yep.
So you didn't have any sectors, or just pick some of the companies other than Oracle, say?
There's not necessarily sectors just yet. Well, there is this in terms of like, I've tracked it this way.
Okay, so let's pick some of these companies and we'll just run through. And this is literally from the hip. So let's look at Coinbase. Is easy at the bottom. Coinbase is easy because essentially they're a highly cyclical stock. If the market's being pumped in crypto, they've got a lot of people, and they probably always have too many people because they're always trying to do new products and stuff, new wallets and all sorts of stuff. So if we look at, say, the Salesforce one, is interesting because at the same time as Salesforce kind of laying off people, they're going through a pretty much revolutionary change in the way that they're trying to monetize.
Yeah,
they've always had seats, and they're still always going to have seats, but they know they've got to try and make money out of their cloud. I think it's called Einstein or something, and then they've also got to somehow move to what is notionally what people call outcome based, and so they're in the midst of a war, basically, where they don't have any product rivals per se, other than what you just said there, which is perfect. People just saying, just this bit heavy, I can just go light and just make it up myself. But what they do have is a competition to say, well, actually, if you do turn around and make it some sort of outcome based, then actually we may well stick with you, because what's the point of doing a new tool when it's still going to involve all that cost when we can just stick with you, but your pricing is a bit horrible now. And so you'd think that they would redeploy some of the people and say, well, actually, we've got a project for 12 months, 18 months, and we're literally going to try and reinvent the new way that we're going to monetize. And so when I looked at your numbers again, I'm thinking a lot of the companies maybe have excess from 21. But like if I look at the blocks, the Atlassians, the Salesforce, even to a degree Microsoft, they're going through a change which is, we have no clue whether we're going to be able to make money other than ripping the eyes out of people who are already customers by just charging more. We need as many smart people who understand this firm well enough to help us through this change. And yeah, we may not need you after 12 months, after 18 months, once we made the change. It's almost like in I don't know if you remember the film Godfather, when Michael says to Tom Hagen, when we make the move to Nevada.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. So they're all making moves. And if you look at Microsoft, they're making moves. Of course, they have massive incumbency that no one's leaving Microsoft. But slowly, if they don't have a really good model stack, people will say, well, it's come up for renewal, let's use Google. Their stack's a bit cheaper and their tokens are cheaper. And it's full stack integrated, and we don't have to dick around with all the other models on top. And so slowly, even if they only lose 1 or 2% per annum, they're in trouble. So the two angles when I saw yours were, one, the angle of basically those people could have been re-employed if basically the company was thinking out the box, because at the same company that they're going to try to either employ FDE or AI architects or AI, I don't know, orchestration people, surely some of these people could be retrained. Surely they could.
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
that's one angle. And the second angle is a bit more Tucker Carlson for you. It's, you'd say roughly 100,000 people. Let's say you were picking the UK, I don't know, say it's 10,000 people in the UK. You could say, I don't know, let's make up my math is wrong here, but say 10,000 people earning 100,000 each. Is that $1 billion? It's at least $1 billion. So you're saying, okay, wait a minute. So we've lost $1 billion worth of like top line revenue. Say you were being Tucker Carlson and you were trying to basically have a go at the government. Wait a minute, you've allowed someone to take $1 billion of top line revenue out of the hands of people. So what is the economic impact of that? Well, someone will get jobs again, but even it won't be one day after. So now we're talking basically 10,000 people looking for jobs and stuff. If you're going to get them, but they were earning over $1 billion, which means they're probably paying tax of about 350 million. It could be 400 million to the government, to the own revenue. Plus, they were spunking money on food. So they were paying 400 million to the government. They might have been spending, I'll just say, 10% of that on food. That would be another 20% VAT. That's basically another 20 million. You could probably say, actually, the government probably immediately had 450 million worth of tax revenues walk out the door.
Yeah. There's a graduate interview, wasn't there? I don't know if you saw that recently, where he said exactly the same thing. He was like, this grad had his job rescinded, and he contacted the company, and he ended up speaking to, he described them as partners, various partners within the business, and one of the partners confessed it was AI.
Yeah.
And when he got off the phone, he was just like, I just don't get it. That means how much money the government won't get through tax, tax receipts because of this stuff. And I'd not really sort of, because the thing that I was trying to work out here is like, what's valuable to people? What do they need to sort of see? I want people to sort of see beyond the kind of hype headlines, but there's clearly going to be a societal impact that needs to be sort of measured somehow, and usually it comes down to pounds and pences. And maybe that's the way to sort of configure it, because at the moment I've not I did have a location box here, but as you can see here, mainly tracks in the US, except like things like ASDA. This is very specific to North Hampshire and all this sort of stuff. You're looking at 1,000+ jobs now. This needs to be confirmed just yet, but just doing the numbers that you said there, that's a lot of tax receipts and a lot of spending power that's lost. If these people don't, and I don't know what the average at the moment is, mate. How long it takes someone to find a job at the moment. If you go on LinkedIn as a sentiment basement, you see some really experienced people who are out of job coming up to 12 months, maybe even 2 years in some cases. Yeah, that's insane, mate.
Totally.
People moving back in with their parents. I mean, I haven't earned a living, mate, since the end of last year. Because I've been focused on these things, but I'm not the only one, and that's a lot of money that's not going back into to the government, right?
Yeah, so that would be at the kind of raging angle, but essentially this is.
And I'm a rager, mate, as you know.
No, but it has though, because even like I suppose some of these companies may have some employees in the UK block, maybe have some employees in the UK and stuff. So it's really what hits people in their pocket, and the government's not really thinking that far ahead. And so what it kind of then talks to is, well, actually, Gary, you're wrong. And you say, what do you mean? Well, because the companies will pay tax on the extra savings. Well, yeah, if they actually pay tax, which is another issue. And if they pay tax and they're completely above board and pucker, well, Yeah, but they pay tax at a different differential. They pay tax, I don't know, 26% or whatever. So then you go, wait a minute, I've lost 45 bips and I'm only getting 26 back. So there's all sorts of angles where they wouldn't, it's just not in a conversation. I've heard it twice now. You're right. The one person you sent me, and I've heard another guy really go down a rabbit hole on this program called Odd Lots. But again, his angle was much facts. And unfortunately, no one's interested in facts anymore. They were factual, and I thought that's really interesting, but it wasn't interesting enough to break through. You got to have some sort of wear jester outfit or something, or be on the, I don't know, wear a fat cat outfit or something. I don't know. It needs something else, like a bit of hoopla.
Yeah. Well, sorry, I was just laughing because you're so true. It's sad. People don't care about facts anymore.
What you got, mate? Facts. Okay, but jog on, mate. Jog on.
I want opinions.
Yeah,
I know, and the more far-reaching, overreaching opinions, the better.
Yeah, rhetoric's fine. Yeah, that worst case, but opinions are half-assed best. But you could jog on, mate, with those facts. We had them yesterday.
But it's true. It's trying to look, because at the end of the day, mate, it's very easy to conflate 16,000 as purely as a number. But as I'm at pains to iterate and reiterate sometimes on some of the socials I sort of make, every one of these is a person, man.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, they may have dependencies. They may not. They may be looking after their parents as well as children. You know, and they're valuable contributors to society that all of a sudden has been stripped of their financial means and God knows what. And you know, and so outside of that immediate individual piece, and it's very difficult for people to sort of relate to that and empathize in this modern world, sadly. You know, we're so disconnected from each other. We only give a shit about the 2 feet in front of us rather than everybody else. But so maybe understanding, actually, okay, so you might be in work, but if the next time you're driving over a pothole, you know, or the trains don't run, or you know, you can't see a doctor, you know, this number might be the reason why, not just because of immigration, as everybody keeps trying to run down your throat, kind of thing. So, yeah, it's certainly something to sort of pair it out with, because I feel it's incomplete at the moment as a space, you know, where I'm trying to give a balanced view, but I also need to make people understand what this impact really means. It's not just numbers, right?
Yeah, and even underneath that, what I liked about it is, imagine if there was a trend underneath this. So let's just say, take the Amazon, Atlassian, and Salesforce. Imagine if there was a trend in, say, I don't know, designers being laid off or something. I made that up. Or basically JavaScript or something, or Node.js, or some web front endish, or something which basically said, well, actually, wait a minute, AI really is taking over the web front end jobs, or
that's what I want to get to, mate,
or something like that. That's really interesting. But even then, I suppose that's still too factual. I'm still trying to find basically like a speaker's corner angle somewhere here. And I think the tax is an angle, definitely, because the government's like always sleeping on tax. Oh, we've got like less revenues, of course we've got cut benefits. Well, yeah, well, why don't you equalize the tax rates, mate? So there's something, but there's an angle. And so if I look at, I don't know if you watch Gary, you've seen Gary's Economics. Yes. So if in reality, I know he's right about half the stuff, but the other half he could talk about, but wouldn't be as interesting. And so therefore he says tax wealth and stuff, and we know that won't really work in per se. Not really. It's never really worked. But he hadn't really got to number, which I think he knows, but he knows it doesn't play to the audience as well. And the real problem is that we have another guy who really goes through it called Henry Fudge. We have a kind of rentier environment where everything is basically subordinated to the value of land. And whether it be in a bank, all our capital is beneficial to the collateral of being land. So you and I go in, we both want loans, we're both as risky as each other. You want to do a startup, I want to do a startup. You've got no collateral, but you've got like Mark Zuckerberg type spunk. I've got Mark Zuckerberg type spunk, but I've got property. I'm getting the loan, you're not. Because they're not going to do any venture capital, anything remotely risky, even though that you could make them a fortune. And so there's no risk capital anymore. realistically in UK banking.
Hmm.
And that's because of the way the government's set up. So I'm trying to find similarly in here the kind of the Gary rhetoric versus the kind of like real solution. There's got to be a solution that people can have understanding of quickly, which then allows them to shard into a real solution, which is actually the Bank of England are the biggest problem in the UK, which no one really agrees. None of my mates agree with that. The Bank of England is the problem. And the way it's set up and the lack of accountability is the problem. Not benefits, not even the Tory party, not Labour Party, the Bank of England, that infrastructure. So I'm looking for a meta, well, one, a rhetoric in this, and then two, kind of meta solution where they would say, oh man, come in and really talk about what you mean, type scenario. I think.
So, yeah, I mean, so what, going back to Gary's thing, as in Gary's economics rather than yourself, your view on that is that what he won't go into it. Why not? Do you think because you think it's just boring?
Well,
in terms of offering this solution, you mean, beyond taxing the wealth?
Okay, so they give you both arguments of the problems. So my view is the Bank of England is the problem because there's capital. That's really boring. This other guy, Henry Fudge, is brilliant, economist, whatever, a wealth manager. He says the problem is the rentier environment, the house inferior of everything, he called it. And the rentier is that everything is subordinated to someone who has land, who will rent the land out to someone. Basically, I mean, we've even done it with digital platforms and stuff, but here we're talking physical. So, so Gary's view of tax wealth, not work, is a very, very simple mantra. It's like build the wall, drain the swamp. It's so easy to okay, I really understand that. Because if you went into and say, well, we basically need to stop the rentier economy, that's sounds a bit French, sounds a bit wank, to be honest. Sounds a bit Ponzi. So yeah. so in that sense, you can't actually say the underlying, which you've got all these things, and actually your last startup is brilliant of these are the underlying things, but actually we also need a headline, and we need a headline that we can get into a mantra that we could put on a board that we can be outside Speaker's Corner with a clapperboard. And the layoffs are really good in. The tax thing is interesting, but again, it's two derivatives of paying away and going, oh yeah, in 2027 our tax receipts are down 0.2% and blah blah. I know it's a little bit too cerebral. So we need.
But maybe it can be equated, just like the sort of gamification piece that you showed me earlier, right?
True.
When you're trying to talk about news and show it as a board game, right? It needs to be not to take the sort of same vein, but when you look, the thing is, if I look at that number, let's say that's a tax receipt number, but in the millions, yeah. So you got £1 billion, let's say. Yeah. What does that £1 billion pay for? Like, this is the problem, right? When you look at numbers, sometimes not your problem, but I think generally speaking, when the media it tells you a number, I have this conversation with my parents. Oh, this happened with this number. They look at me and go, and I don't really understand. What does that mean to me? But if you think like £1 billion could pay for this in schools, this on your roads, this in whatever it might be, which translates to people not going on strike, or this, that, and the other, or lift people out of poverty, or how many skill meals. I think is that closer to home for people to sort of understand what decisions around technology, specifically about AI, is doing to you. Right, you might not be the person getting laid off at Amazon, Atlassian, Salesforce, etc., etc., etc. But these people having that problem means you have this problem. That's why it matters to you. Maybe.
Yes, I like that. Okay, whilst you were talking, you gave me another angle similar to that, which is imagine if you had a factor on that. So you're saying that and if I use Gary's language, you're saying that, say the Amazon people were in the UK, they're not, but say they were, then you're saying that redundancy or that layoff for AI is a wealth transfer. Hear me out, it's a little bit random. So man,
that's exactly it.
Laid off 16,000 people in the UK, and he is going to transfer that UK wealth to some other country. Could be BVI, could be the US, because he's going to basically, the AI is not going to have a denomination. The AI has no passport. So
Well, pay tax.
the profits are going back to America, say. So you'll say, so I'm thinking like a balance sheet, and it will be positive and negative. So money going from Jimmy to Jane, from Jemima to Jack, I always say James, type thing. And a very simple like crib sheet, and people like, it will get everybody angry because people are like, who the hell is this kid? Has he even done economics at Oxford or something? There's all that sort of stuff. And it'll be like, who did you get your calculation? The calculation's irrelevant because no one looks at real calculations anyway. You just told me about SpaceX. So it's more
I mean, their response is pictures.
And that's it, spaceships in on the moon and stuff. So it's not necessarily the correctness of it, it's the pinpointedness of it. And then man is basically saying every single one of these is a wealth transfer. Some of the states to the states, some of the states to BVI, some of the states to Ireland, because actually they're all the IPs in Ireland for these big companies, and saying, well, they're going to transfer it and pay 12.5% versus what they would pay for a kind of a federal tax plus GST plus state tax plus all the other stuff for like a Silicon Valley employee. So all of it can be seen as literally a take from your pocket and put into my pocket. But I don't know how to do that emotionally without saying. But these are wealth transfers, almost like a transfer price of some sort. But that transfer price is a bit boring. But that's kind of thing of saying, literally, he's taking money out of your pocket and he's putting it into her pocket, and she happens to live in blah 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 country.
Yeah, and I think that's it. You know, in its rawest form. For people to sort of sit up and go, that's what's happening. Because, you know, what I've always thought about, I mean, we spoke about this in parts before, right? Taking a step back here. By introducing AI agents into your business, people get excited because the technology feels very magical. And it is. And the ability for you to go, God, this thing that I've been challenged to do for so long would have taken me all this time to do. Now it takes me this much time. I can do all these things in parallel. It's amazing, amazing, amazing. Cool. Then in the real world, you allow these AI bots to come in, right? I had a cursory glance about the consultancy evolution, where they're going to adopt all these AI agents into the kind of field days, and then you're going to have these SOWs where Man and Gary, as part of the team, now have 4 bots each, and this is the stuff that they're going to do. Let's say in an audit, an EY audit, right? If they fuck up, what happens? Who's to blame, right? Is it the firm's fault, you as an individual, or is the AI bot? You can't fire an AI bot, right? You can't fire them. You can turn them off, but you just go, oh, I've replaced this. You know, beforehand, Gary wasn't up to it, or Man wasn't up to it. I'm going to replace Man with Gary and Gary with Man, whatever it might be, right? Vice versa. Oh, I've replaced bot AI 1 with bot AI 2. Don't worry, it's a much better version. It doesn't work that way. So there's a detachment that's happening in terms of the way we govern work and the value and the quality of work, right? That's one side. The rights of a bot. The bot can't go, you've overworked me, right? So what happens then? The bot also doesn't pay tax.
Yes, that's
an angle. So when, you know what I mean? So if you all of a sudden you've got a bot that can do 5 people's jobs. I often read these things. This thing can do 5 people's work. Straight away my brain goes, fuck. Before it used to be, fuck, that means 5 people have now got spending power that's no longer going back into the economy. Now in this conversation, I think we're looking at it the other way, which is that's 5 people who are not paying tax.
Yeah.
And this bot isn't paying tax. And then to your further point to compound this, which I've not really even thought about, which is obviously Gary's point, the other Gary that is, and so on and so forth, points about tax. If the company is saving revenue, what we should also be tracking is, are they paying more tax? You know, because of this stuff. And the answer is probably no, man. You know?
No, the tax rates are different. Even if they were completely above board, the tax rates are different. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so for that reason, and plus they'll be moving it all over the place. But that has much more of a Gary angle. But basically, there's a person in the States. I can't remember if it's which one is it. Is it? It was not Bernie Sanders, or is it Elizabeth
Warren?
Warren talking about token taxes. You heard that one?
No, I'm not saying, but that's interesting.
So again, she knows, she's an economist, so she knows that's not viable, but that's irrelevant. But is it legible? Yes. We propose that every single token should have a tax attached. Man used 1 million tokens today at work. That equated to, let's just say, 1/3 of a body that he replaced. Great. We're going to add 50 cents on to the cost. So it's $25 per million tokens or whatever. We're going to make it 25.5. So it's so simple, so incorrect from an economics perspective to do it that way. It's not even funny, but such an easy wind up to get everybody engaged. People were like, who the hell is this cat? Who is this cat sitting at home talking about token tax? This will basically, this is going to lead to 3% drop in GDP, and you get all sorts of people making up shit on the back of it. And if you look at what the AI industry has been able to do, man, I'll give you an example. Imagine if I said to you, man, I'm going to give you an ATS. And I've really just half-assed it with my little daughter. Kind of like, it works-ish. It's like 75%. I'm going to charge you full whack. And I'm going to get you to do all the work to get it to work properly. And then I'm going to suck in all that stuff that you've done. And then I'm going to replay it in the market and then sell more. You'd be like, no, I'm just going to go and buy an ATS that works. Just give me greenhouse. Just get out of it, son.
Yeah.
But AI has been uniquely good at getting people to do the work in terms of completing. Even SAP did work before we put it in. We put it in a half-assed way. But did it work for Walmart? Yeah. Look at big Walmart. Did it work for Formula One cars? Yeah. Mercedes? Yeah, it worked. It works. But we put it in a half-assed way, but we know the construct of it works. You can put in an ATS badly, as you know. So, but this is unique. It's like saying, no, I'm just going to give you a half-assed version, man, and you're going to just remediate it. I'm going to learn what you do. I'm going to watch you like Mark Zuckerberg or whatever, and I'm going to learn from you. And you're going to do all the shilling for it as well. You're going to talk it up, how it's improved your life and that. But I'm going to give you, it's going to be 50% to 75% complete, which is kind of where a lot of the stuff is for most areas of AI. And I'm happy to work with it because, say, I've got time on my hand. You're happy to work with it. But if you've got 10,000 people in the firm, 50%, 75% ain't good enough. And so all of these things talk to issues, but you need kind of a litmus, annoying thing that people will come back to you and literally want to basically DM you and talk about you in the comments.
But I think it is about, look, what in this day and age, sadly, I mean, it's mental. 2026, one of the most advanced countries in the world, supposedly, this, that, and the other in the G7. There is so much poverty. And when people aren't working, all we can suspect to see is it's a safe assumption to assume there's going to be a likelihood of an increased amount of poverty. And you can measure that simple benchmark with the number of food banks. The fact that something like a Trussell Project exists, mate, is mental in this country, right? But it does. And it's a growing entity because not all the wrong reasons. They don't want to exist. They don't want to have to be there to provide to people who can't access food in a supermarket, right? But they're having to rely on the kindness of donations of strangers, in order to feed their families and all that sort of stuff. And you can trace, I feel, the thing that I've shown you with the displacement, with these numbers, to that, to show you a paradigm shift, as the word you called it, of the wealth transfer. And that's just me talking about what it means and impact on that side, let alone what you're saying. Actually, this money, you imagine that we could show it as a map, mate. That means this number shows this now arrows cash to this person's pocket, this person's pocket. If you tie it with the idea that you had to me a couple months ago, mate, I'm not going a couple months ago, a few weeks back, where you were showing me actually the job as a stock price.
Yes.
Index.
Yeah, so I'm still going to do that basically, but that is the other side of your thing to say. Actually, well,
the trend.
You said 94,000 jobs confirmed or not confirmed. Okay, where are the 94,000 jobs that have been recreated?
I can't find that data, Gary. I want to interrogate those numbers, right? 16,000 here, and I want to be able to click in that and show you, because I'm building, on the other hand, using ONET data, lots and lots of research information based on things I can track, right? on the including marketing material from things like HubSpot, let's say, because if you think of, it's funny, I converse with AI about this a lot, where they go, this is marketing information, it's not very valuable in terms of, because obviously it's going to be biased and stretched. But I'm like, yeah, but you don't understand. If it's showing you the advancements of what the tool can do inside the industry, it's also showing you what skills and experiences are getting eroded in terms of that value, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's what I want to be able to show. The displacement tracker I want to be able to build, mate, is the end where you can click that and show you, actually, of those 16,000 per head, these are the things that are going.
Yeah.
Is it JavaScript? Is it React? What is it? What is it? I can't find that. And quite rightly, they don't want to show you that data. I'm literally going on to like Reddit threads, man, trying to decide. But you can't. As much as I love Reddit, it's not gospel, is it? So much of it's subjective.
Yeah.
So, and I've got to be careful of that.
Yeah, so but no, you built out. I think it's very, very good. And it's just, we're saying what is the kind of polemic? What is the angle that basically is so simple that people say, yeah, I kind of get that. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, there's going to be. And I suppose if you look back in, say, the 80s, no one really realized, well, a lot of people did actually, that by losing the kind of the pits and stuff, yeah, okay, well, we saved, I don't know, say it's 10 billion we saved, I don't know, it wasn't that much, but say we saved 10 billion. Okay, but what is going to be the cost basically of all the industries that you're basically losing upstairs? Basically all the nightclubs that closed down, all the fish and chips clubs that closed down, all the kind of working men's clubs, all the other things around it, because you were simply just transferring wealth. We're basically transferring wealth from one pot to another. And I was talking to Mrs. yesterday about student loans and stuff about my son, who's only 15, so it's not relevant yet, and saying, if anybody really knew publicly, well, if everybody knew, not anybody, because people know exactly why the government's in a bind, they would either say, yeah, Rachel's right, or we've got to find the money somewhere. And the bind is very simple. And I've only heard one person talk about it, and it's the government has 260 billion worth of student debt.
Yeah, they're not going to write that off.
No one in their right mind, not you, not me, not my missus, no one would say, you know what, yeah, go on, write off 10% a year. Because that means they're messing about with votes trying to find 5 billion in welfare. What says try and find 5 times that? So you're like, oh, wait a minute, there's no way that's going to happen. No way on earth. So that number alone is enough to be the arsehole on speakers' corners talking about it, whichever way, left or right or wrong. That number is enough so everybody understands, because people understand billions. And I think in a very similar way, you have that number in your spreadsheet, which is, this is the amount of money that's either moved, or the amount of money that's going to be sitting idle because they're not allowed to spend for 2-3 months because they're unemployed, or someone is going to be displaced. If there are no new jobs, then those 94,000 people have to displace someone if they're going to get another job, because there's no new jobs. And then there are job reports, no new jobs. We get job reports here. And so I'm happy to say on whatever, just make it up with you. But essentially, without being perfective, you could match the number of jobs that the UK actually publish, which we do publish a bit late, and the US and stuff, with the number of jobs that's lost, and create some sort of like Gary economics type number of.
Because I quite often when I'm driving, to wherever I'm going, or picking up the kids, or going to the gym or something, I put the radio on. The thing that always grabs me isn't the numbers, right? The number, because it's interesting. You must have seen this thing where people go, for you to count in seconds to 1 million, it takes you this amount of time. I think it's 11 minutes. If you count a billion, it takes you closer to a month or something silly. It's insane, right? The difference is so big that people don't really understand, because we're talking B's and M's and T's now, like it's nothing. But the thing that always grasps me, mate, is this: when they say, and I sit up and it really worries me, where I go, the number of job losses is larger than the number of job vacancies. Yeah. Because if you are not, we're hiring more than we're losing, there is hope. But if we're not, then that seesaw will never get the country in its way. To your point about the student loan piece, mate, I think it's an absolute outrage. But you're right. Who the fuck is going to write that off? You're not.
No one would agree to that. Not even people who hate them would say, yeah, okay, that makes sense. And so, exactly, it's like most of the things we have. They're issues that they're only issues because people feel them personally. But actually, when you look at the bigger picture, you say, shit, okay, well, let's stop the rot now. But actually, then there's a knock-on effect. So if you look at what Gary's done successfully, but also could be done from another angle without the qualifications, is he's been successful in getting the economic point of view out. But you don't have to be economists to feel the obvious and see the obvious and to kind of argue about trade-offs, as it were. And that's Scott Galloway does that really well because he's a specialist in branding, I assume, and he had a startup. But he's very good at basically sharding information through his worldview. And so if I'm going to play it for you, because it's all about you today, if your worldview, as demonstrated by data and the work that you put in, is saying we need to somehow understand that this may cause some problems, this layoff stuff and the replacement of human capital for AI capital, and we don't know what that is, but that's your worldview, that this could social problems, welfare problems, this tax problem. And so every piece of information to create a media company, is not content, is sharded through his view, basically to say, what's the impact on, I'm calling it the Man-Wong tax transfer index. Just make it up. What's the view? And then what? And then people are like, why do you think you're talking about tax transfer index? But people understand tax transfers. And it promoting you because they say, well, and it doesn't have to be perfected. Because if I look at some of the stuff that Nigel Farage and I can't remember what they're called now, the Henley Group have done, they say, if you increase tax rates, this many millionaires are going to leave. Now, they've literally made it up.
Yeah.
So Henley Partners, so allegedly make it up. Allegedly made it up. And they're the only people coming out with it, but it's quoted everywhere. And
yes.
No one goes down and says, how many people are in this group? What is their political affiliation? Who funded them? Blah, 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 blah. How did they do the numbers? How big is the survey? Was that survey? None of those, because those are all kind of statistical things only someone like me would be like, oh, okay, that's not statistically significant enough number of people. Or you can't use LinkedIn and you can't use null surveys. No one cares about that. So yours is already more research than that. And now we're saying, how do we get it out into kind of wider market?
Yeah, it's true. It's been really useful in terms of thinking really like that, Gary. You know, to understand. You know, it's like it's raining right now, and as you were talking, I was trying to work it as an analogy in my head to go, you know, oh, someone says to you, do you know what? We've had 3 inches of rain this month. What the fuck does that mean?
Yeah.
Right. You know, but if I be able to say, but if every inch of, I'm making all this up, right? Every inch of rain means this into the system, or overflow of dam, which then creates this in flooding or whatever it might be. Or actually, better, we've had no rain for this many days.
Yeah.
And this is the impact of it has on the food distribution, food cycle, which then leads to a collapse in the distribution, whatever it might be, right? Or corn, or I don't know. That is what gets people to sort of sit up and go, because right now the thing is with this stuff, it's interesting to me, and I'm really happy and glad you found it interesting, and we can have an hour's conversation around this. But what, you know, in sales, it's always what with them, what you know, what's in it for me.
Yeah.
In sales, they call it that all the time. With them, what's in it for me? And right now, when someone looks at that, I go, "Oh, I don't work for Asda. Who cares?"
Yeah.
You know, I don't work for Block. You know, and also they conflate it when they go 8,000, 10,000 people. Probably too many delivery drivers out there anyway.
Yeah.
You know, and because until we can see the interrogation of that data and really sort of work out where, because I think that hits home more, right? If you can see it actually, people that work in development teams or sales. Oh, actually, my cousin does. That already brings it closer to home.
Yeah.
You know, trying to think of that 7 degrees of bacon. And I think tax maybe is a good way, but actually it's taken a step further. By not getting this number of tax receipts in, this means this for you.
Yes. That's an interesting for you to promote yourself, because it doesn't ignore the individual, but it says essentially we are machines created to give the government money. Let's be fair, because the minute we don't give the government money, then they're saying that we need to cut their welfare bill. So clearly, they're the kind of a view of, well, basically, you're here to work, and that's the whole schooling system is set up for you to do 9 to 5 work. Let's be fair. So in that sense, you're hitting people exactly where they need to be hit, and it's kind of, I was saying to Maria that actually I've been watching a lot of TikToks about university accounts, and she's like, you really are sad. So someone will go through the accounts of a university and say, this is how much surplus and this is how much fun. I think, is this really popular on TikTok? And it is. And I think it's not just me. So this is like, it's like accounting.
Oh, right. Sorry. They're actual financial accounts.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so this is finance porn, mate. This is the kind of porn. So they open a balance sheet. I get all excited. I'm like, here we go. I'm dressed. It's going to get hot in here.
Use the LOF account.
Why is this guy naked watching TikTok? Well,
Brilliant.
So and then they say this is a surplus of Nottingham University or Warwick or whatever. You're like, fucking 40 million. So how have they got such a big surplus?
You're kidding me?
Yeah. So pretty much we know that there's a trade-off. So if Rachel stops funding universities, then basically students, then some of them have to go bankrupt, basically. If we stop allowing so many people to come in on student visas, then we have less immigration, but then the 22 billion is cut in half for the universities. And then that means the government's either got to close down the university or find another 11 billion of tax from somewhere to give to the universities or shut them down. And so there's trade-offs everywhere. And you've actually got me thinking about this is really random. So someone was saying that the most popular faceless channels on say something like YouTube are the ones where they have some sort of battle environment, and then you just have things blowing up and stuff. It sounds really stupid. So imagine so there's a guy who does a faceless one about wars and Ukraine and
yeah.
And there's just shit blowing up all the time. Because you can do that, you can get the images blowing up, and then obviously your speech. Your speech is very good, so you could even talk over it. So imagine this as some sort of grand game where these people being laid off are just pawns being knocked over in your game, and then you've got real stats, which is the structure. You've got real stats and pawns being knocked over, and people playing all these games with these marionettes and pawns above it. Pawns above it. And then just basically just being blown up all over the place. Sounds ridiculous. But it's kind of saying, how would you do it on Fox News? How would you play this on Fox News to make it into the Tucker Carlson show? It's a bad example, but he's actually a very good presenter. He's sent some crazy shit, and he is crazy, but he's a phenomenal personality and presenter.
Oh yeah, and he's unafraid. I hated him on Fox.
Yeah, but
obviously since getting sacked from there and having his eyes open about what's going on in his country from a foreign policy point of view and the influence of foreign governments, he's like a sleeper agent, isn't he? He's just woke up and he's asking the questions, the most difficult questions. Yeah, totally. He's not afraid to be shied away from this sort of stuff. So I completely understand what you mean, and he's able to draw attention from the audience in a very interesting way. Because I anytime I've ever watched this stuff, if it comes on, I always leave with a question, as opposed to an answer.
Yeah,
and I think that's what's interesting, and I want this to be the case. I want someone to come across and build something even more interesting about displacement and really hone in on pain, so people really understand what is actually fucking happening right now in our workforce. Look, AI is not evil. I was trying to have this conversation with this neuroscientist that I know, who's very pro AI, right? And I'm like, look, I'm not against it. I fucking use it every day. What I'm trying to say to you, but in the hands of people who are either ignorant to its impacts or purposeful with its impacts, when it comes to changing lives, then we need to sit up and understand more. And what we're doing at the moment is understanding it after the event.
Yes. Yeah, that's most things here, yeah. Yeah,
you know, and because we can only see the impact on that way. But even after the event, Gary, because so many of these things are coming thick and fast, you know, I mean, one day I was talking about Cisco, Coinbase, Intuit, Standard Chartered Bank in the same 24, 48 hours, mate.
yeah,
And then straight after that, you're going, oh, there's Coinbase now, there's this, and so, right? It's coming so fast. My fear of this is that, are we becoming desensitized to it in such a way that these numbers are so routine that we're forgetting there are people? So having this conversation with you today to go, well, actually, how do I bring this back home, you know, in a way where actually, because, you know, everybody talks about, oh, I love my country, they're patriots, right? Maybe it is about tax and how it's impacting potentially school budgets, how it's going to mean that so and so is going to get closed down for this, that, and the other. You know, you talk about the 80s, right? Wouldn't it have been interesting to track it against unemployment when, because you can see coal mines shut down. I lived in Chesterfield. I grew up in a coal mining town in the 80s.
yeah.
What I instantly saw, mate, when the coal mines collapsed was how much busier our street was in pubs. Right? I don't know. I'm not stating it as fact, but wouldn't it have been interesting to understand whether loss of unemployment meant particularly men, did that increase the number of alcohol units consumed, and did that mean that alcoholism increased, and did that have an impact on the NHS? I don't, mate. I'm maybe a clutch at straws, but there are parallels here that hit home in different ways for people, and this sort of index, be it mine or someone else that comes up with this sort of stuff, is going to show that. And you know, talking to you about it today, I'm going, fuck, how do I link this together? But I think it'll be an interesting insight to see, actually, if you reduce the number of tax receipts and the companies that are benefiting from this aren't paying their portion of tax, even if they are, mate, because the tier structure is different, right? We are still losing this much money. What does that mean for you? What does that mean to you personally? You know, and I think, you know, that will help people understand it beyond, okay, 16,000 people got let go of Amazon, and you know, kind of thing.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say that's an angle which can be game theoried out in terms of game theory, where you're playing literally a game where you're talking about the transfer of tax, transfer of people, and therefore you have kind of infinite content on your IP, because essentially every day there's shit happening. BPOs closing down. I listened to someone talking about BPOs the other day, and that BPOs are also going through a transition. There's a guy, Asian guy I talked to, who worked as a senior dev guy, who's on a shit ton of money at Amazon or something, and he talked to one of the best people he remembers in a kind of GCC area in India, who really helped him out. Said that he was unemployed, this guy in India, and said this guy was like a top tier guy, and just because the numbers are slowly not collapsing, but basically they're shrinking. They're saying, well, yeah, okay, if you're kind of got these FDE skills or this AI skill or whatever, yeah, of course there's GCCs and there's still like heavy use in, but some of the roles around the margin may not be there like they were before. And so he's seeing that he goes at the top echelon of this guy was like a baller. And so he says the BPO market's also going to experience some sort of stress. So this is kind of a globalish game. And if we think about a way that it could be gamed out, where every single article could be discussed by yourself, or you can invite a guest or whatever, sometimes have me on, where you can literally you can talk anyway for an hour, but you're talking and you're moving shit around at the same time, and it makes it much easier to be able to just rap forever.
Yeah, I think so, you know, and I mean, it's all speculative because obviously it's a moving target. You know, 16,000 people that get laid off, please God, some of them, most of them, all of them will have new jobs. Yeah. So it's not a static figure that will always remain the same. But at point of reference, what people need to understand is for every job laid off, maybe I'll do it over time, right? Every job laid off over a week means this, a month, and so on and so forth, right? And on an annual basis, if it takes 12 months, because what we're going to be able to see soon, very soon, I think, is and this data that I can't find either at the moment, is how long it's taking people to find a job. You know, And that
Yeah.
shows you how many people are out in the market. And this is why people are able to tell you at this stage in time there are more people out of work versus those that are not versus the jobs, sorry, that are available for them to be replaced into. Now, what is interesting also is there is in the States, I don't see it in the UK right now, is that allegedly there are more registered new companies. So more people are starting businesses.
Yeah.
And I'm one of them, mate, because I'm like, I tried to look for a job, had a couple of interviews, sent loads of applications, sort of got nowhere with it. I'm like, well, I can't sit here twiddling my thumbs, you know. I hate
Yeah.
being bored. I need to do something, and maybe I'll start my own business again, that kind of thing. And maybe that's the way we see this. And that, you know, and that's worth tracking as well as a counter signal to go, okay, layoffs might be happening, which is awful, but does it increase productivity in a different way? I don't know, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so it's interesting, but yes, so that's a definitely good point. That would be a very good talking point, because I suppose we have to work out two things that I've always trying to work out in my content and in the last couple of weeks. Of I need to have an enemy, and Gary's got an enemy. It's wealthy people. It's simple. Tucker Carlson had enemies like everybody, pretty much, but mostly the left. But now it's whatever. And I suppose the enemy's got to be easy. And some of the content I've done, I've struggled with a real enemy. So there has to be an enemy, and then obviously you have to be the kind of hero with a simple message. And so the question is, who is the enemy here? Is it the government sleeping? Is it the companies? I don't know which one. The very clear enemy that you could say, well, this person is noticeably bad.
If you know you've seen a few things on my stuff on YouTube. I talk about is it's not necessarily, I haven't described it as an enemy, but I know exactly what you mean. Mine's all about systems, and I believe systems are governed purely by incentives.
Yeah.
They are, and that's because my worldview is very warply shaped by my experiences in my professional work, and where I've engaged with predominantly financial services. And the systems that govern the way people operate in these things is always about incentives, and it tends to be around money, mate. You know, shareholders and all this sort of stuff. People make decisions based on when they need to give accountability to shareholders, because the system is designed that way. Where you know, I cite Henry Ford about this. I want to pay my workers more cash. The Mustang boys went no, you know, and we'll go to the Supreme Court for this, and they won. Because they went, well, look, your fiduciary duty is to make us rich, not to pay your workers more cash. And because that precedent got set however many years ago, it's filtered through and continued on today, mate. And that's why people who in Standard Chartered Bank can sit there and go, sorry, mate, you guys are all low value human capital. I'm fucking you off, 8,000 of you. Meanwhile, mate, I was you know, you see these Senate hearings, don't you? I mean, the guy in Boeing was sat there, the CEO of Boeing, in the last, I don't know when this was, I think it was last year, when he sat down and did the hearing, mate, his salary went up to 32 million that year, which was 8% increase. No, it wasn't, it was more than 8% increase. It was crazy. His staff, the people that work there, the workers, right, machinists, engineers, right, people actually building the damn things, their salary increased 1% over 8 years, Gary.
Yeah.
That's a system. It's corruption. It's greed. That's what, you know, my enemy is that. I'm not necessarily, Boeing as an entity isn't evil, mate. I'd even go so far as to say Palantir as an entity isn't evil. But Peter Thiel and, you know, the psychopath that runs this thing, they've got evil intentions, mate. And that we've got to be sitting up and cognizant of these things, and that's what governs these decisions to go, you're all compromisable. We're going to get rid of you guys. And that's the thing. What I believe is the case. Billionaires as a I mean, Jeff Bezos is a co-founder. Let's call him a co-founder. He's one of the early people in Amazon, right? He's a billionaire. And he's not an evil guy, mate. He's campaigning for workers. I can't remember his name now. He was on Diary of CEO recently with Daniel Priestley and Stephen Bartlett. It's worth checking out. And he's got, you know, and his manifesto, whether it works or not, I don't know. But at least he's speaking on behalf of people, mate. So, you know, to label billionaires as this, that, and the other is unfair. But there is a commonality in terms of the way they perceive things, because they're detached from what you and I go through day to day, mate. They don't need to go queue up at a GP.
Yeah.
Come on.
So actually, okay. So taking that, okay. So say I watched The Matrix again last week, which is brilliant. But
The first one.
Yeah, the first one. If you look
Yeah.
at what people have been saying for a while, they're saying that we are going to introduce digital workers. So this is just polemic, yeah. So imagine if you're trying to be like Gary. You try and do Elizabeth Warren, but not with the tokens, because that's just in usage, whatever. It's like, no, we're going to have a digital worker tax. And people are like, what the fuck is this guy talking about, digital workers? You've told us for the last 3 years you're going to replace these human workers with digital workers. That's cool. Just like there really should have been a tax on moving stuff to another country, like moving headcount to another country. There should have been a transfer tax. There should have been. So you say, yeah, I'm just going to start. And because only 0.1% of people will agree with you, then it'll be 1%. And the other 99 will basically just give you shit. But it's an angle of saying, well, I'm working out these humans are paying this much tax, and these digital workers are going to pay nothing. They're going to be in Ireland or BBI or whatever. And people get it. That's it. Did you get it? Yeah. Okay. And because they've used that labeling for such a long time, it's very hard for them to reverse the label of digital worker, because people have said they're digital workers. Even there's humanoids running about and there's things in space. So all of this is saying, well, actually, yeah, I'm replacing human workers for digital workers. So tax digital workers as well as human workers. That doesn't sound right the same, but something as simple as that, which is, and then your whole strategy is, again, remember, I'm making all this up on the fly, so don't take any of this as advice. I
feel it, Gary. Look at this.
Yeah, your strategy basically is, well, this is how many human workers were laid off. How many digital workers can we tax to get the same tax revenue? Okay, and people are, oh, fuck. And it's enough to basically get people saying, well, 99% of people saying he's an idiot. How are you going to tax digital workers? It's software. No, it's not. You told me it's not software, because you told me all the SaaS software is shit, and this is not software, because that's why the market's been downgraded for software. So it's not software. So what is it? So it forces them into a corner where they've already said it's digital work, because it's not just software. Because we want it rated higher, and it's basically cognizant and stuff. And then you say, yeah, well, we should tax it. And then we just discuss elaborate tax. We go down a rabbit hole, basically, of discussing different tax rates and how the tax work. All of it is just made up. Most of it's insane.
But it's far-fetched enough that should be discussed because of the reasons that we've talked about, right? The narrative piece, going right back to the beginning of the conversation, the narrative is what's important. And a narrative from a company, right, it's about incentives, mate. Their structure is to go, hey, listen, Mr. Client, don't worry about your work. It's going to get delivered on time, because this thing works 24/7, always available, right? It never shouts, doesn't get emotional, doesn't take less sick days. It's going to be there for you to help you do your audit or whatever it is, right? You can't have that now. And they're going to I'm going to say this word wrong because I always say it wrong. Amorphize it, but
anthropomorphize.
I can never say
Anthropomorphize.
Right, I can never say that word. Anyway, because we're going to give it a name. Jack or Jill is going to come do this for you, right? Yeah. But you don't come then conversely go when the company's house, or sorry, HMRC knock on the door and go, hey, dude, you now pay us tax for Jack and Jill. Oh, no, they're digital workers, nothing to do with that. But the moment you can say because they can say it, this thing's now doing 4 people's jobs. Are we then go, well, they were all on 50 grand. Does that mean the value of this thing is now 200 grand? Should we be taxing 200 grand?
That's a good question. It's a debate. It's a debate that's so far in there. It's the data centers in the sky, in space debate, where somehow that's been normalized that, well, it's possible. And similarly with AI, when someone says that and puts 15 pictures at the front of S1, everybody's now scrambling in a kind of vortex of trying to explain, well, they can be. And if we do this, remember Superman and Doctor and General Zod coming down on that flying thing? And so people are trying to justify shit that shouldn't be justified.
Very smart people are trying to justify it.
In a very similar way, you could be basically that person that comes up with something which is just on the edge of reality. I'll give you an example. So I've been trying to write this little cartoon skit about, okay, there's a problem with data centers, yeah? people making lots of noise and stuff with the water, this and that, and the resources and electricity. So I'm just writing little comedy skits, and I've got this like mayor who's basically kind of like means well, but he's tone deaf. And so someone said, okay, look, you're not going to have a water center in a data center where we live. This is crazy because it's to the noise and they're using water and resources and stuff. It's crazy. And the mayor says, I've got something. Okay, I hear you. I hear your concerns. I've got something. I've got a solution. And they say, oh, great. What is it? No data center? He goes, no, better than that. We're going to keep the data center, but we're going to have a water park on the back of it. So all the water that runs through it for cooling, your kids can use as a water park on a wave pool. Now, tell me what you think about that. So you're laughing because you know that water's toxic, yeah?
Yes.
But if I said the water's toxic, people are like, Shagan, whatever. So he said, no. So this mayor said, no, we're going to have a water park on the back of it, which then prompts everybody to say, that's insane because the water's toxic.
Yeah.
Because everybody knows it, but everybody knows it a different way. So in many ways, you want to be able to draw out the problem of the redundancies. We're in a well-meaning way, but in a much more like we don't care. So we have to pretend we don't actually care about the people. We just care about the tax, or we just care about basically getting our tax money and not paying any more tax. So we have to make it seem really selfish for the wider picture.
Yeah, well, so in terms of talking to the company, for instance, if they're like, if you've got rid of 4 people and it equates to 200K's worth of salaries, you know, it's just talking about it as a value, you know. So because the system is always in favor of the business, right? Yeah. Look, we've saved 200 grand. Now that's what they pronounce their shareholders, but the only way we can stop that. I'm not saying, by the way, in certain cases and certain attributes and roles and duties shouldn't be done in an automated fashion using things like AI and technology. There are so many things AI can do better than me, right? Yeah. But that shouldn't automatically mean, I use me, I should be displaced necessarily from the job. It just means my job should evolve into something else that creates more value. There's an argument, for instance, in customer services, right? You should be paying a very good customer services person 6 figures because I agree. You know what I mean, right? And I think that's a very genuine conversation you can have across all the vertices within a business, right? Across the different kind of vertical duties. But going back to the salary point, but by reducing it, by removing its people, when you're talking to a company and just talking about the value, why should, you know, the obvious question is, from a government point of view, from a regulatory point of view, and from a societal point of view, I'm not suggesting we get pitchforks out, right? But we should be saying, why should that £200,000 worth of value be only absorbed into the company, right? Because the things that are getting offset are, forget people, as you say, the value that they contributed back to society was this, in tax receipts, in NI, in expenditure. We lose all that. This is the same conversation that people keep saying, right? There's a brilliant post on Reddit that I cited, which was, if AI can do everything and we've got nothing to do, and we don't earn any more money anymore, who buys this shit from these big companies? You know, so they have to work out a back door of revenue that comes back to these people. And my argument is, you'll still win, because you're now not paying holiday, sick pay, all those others kind of like employee benefits. Yeah. But what matters to the government, and what they should be sat up and talking about this, is like, how the fuck do we get our tax, guys?
Yeah, that's what Elizabeth Warren is trying to kind of doing in a kind of very, very good way, because she knows the token tax is a nonsense idea. She knows it is, but actually is a fantastic idea because it's so simple and everybody can understand.
I don't think it is a nonsense idea, Gary. As you were talking about it and you were like dispelling it, I was like, maybe I'm not seeing this properly. I'm going, they're already measuring the token consumption, right? It's already built into the model. They can tell me how much if I put $5 worth of credit in somewhere, they don't itemize it well enough for me, in my opinion. But that's another conversation. Yeah. But I can quickly see a balance on there. And if they can quickly measure the balance on this, like a meter, Sam Altman's thing, we want to charge intelligence by the meter. Okay, if you can do that, that means you can tell me what's being consumed. Why can't I tax you on that? Why can't I tax you?
It's true. Yeah, I think it's at least out there for a very good debate where people would go down, oh, we've written a paper on this and da da da, and there'd be all sorts of rational reasons why people say it's not possible. And economically, I don't think it's the best idea, but I love it because it is the best idea, because it's so simple to explain and it's so visible. People would cheat it. My problem with it, people would half-ass it and cheat it and say, this is the official rate, but I'm going to basically charge you this. And then you'd have to trace it and it'd be a problem to trace and stuff. But other than that, it's the kind of brilliant idea that actually in this content world that we're in, with the IP that you have, could be used.
But it's going to birth the, if we go down this route, I was just thinking, as you said, oh, people are cheating. It's going to birth this. It's like, it's in a way like LIBOR, right?
Yeah.
People fixing the rates between
Yeah.
the banks, yeah. And then it birthed the compliance fraud economy, you know, almost. It was an economy in itself, it was a very small sub-economy, but it was vibrant. I remember seeing some of the contractor rates. I was going, geez, man, you know, and then trying to find the right skill sets to kind of fold into these areas. Maybe that's what we'll see, because the old world is not catching up to the innovation.
Yes.
So far-fetched ideas that I've seen far-fetched today, mate. It's like the first person that ever told you about, hey, saw the bicycle and went, what if we put an engine on that?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And people went, you're nuts.
Yeah.
You're mental. But then they did, and things like Maving, Triumph, and Harleys all came about, right? And then obviously we introduced a new regulatory aspects to it in terms of road safety, helmets, all that sort of stuff, standards, which birthed a new economy. That is what we should be considering here, where we go, if we should be discussing far-fetched ideas to work about tax. And if something like taxing tokens is stupid, okay, why? Give me your rebuttals. Here's what I think we should do. And then your idea, I go, well, if someone games it, well, why can't we introduce people that traces this? Tax fraud detection, this, that, and the other. Matt, look, all of this is made up clearly, but it is feasible because we have to think of these things in order to keep pace with what's actually happening at this stage in time, mate. Because otherwise, companies are, mate, I really believe this is going to happen. I keep saying this to my wife. You're going to turn up one day, you're going to onboard someone, and they'll never talk to a human being.
Yeah.
Your entire there's already this thing online, mate, where this guy went, oh my god, I've worked for this company for 2 weeks now. The onboarding process has been amazing because the laptop came with an AI bot, and they just walked me through everything. And I'm like, yeah, I can understand exactly why, but isn't it a bit tragic that you spoke to nobody?
Yeah.
You didn't meet the person in IT. You didn't, you talk to the person that handles these things, and you have that walkthrough as you would do, not even through Loom, an onboarding SOP thing, but you're doing it entirely through a bot. I'm like, I get the efficiency. I get how slick it might be, but you've lost that entire human piece, and that's the danger of this. But it will create new ways to go, well, how do we how do we monitor it? How do we use that human side to it? And tax at this level needs to be the case before we lose any ability to trace it, mate. Excuse me.
Yeah, so I think basically your name of, what have you called the index? Displacement index.
Yeah, it is literally Ron Seal. Mate, I've got a coaching app called Coach. I've got,
I like displacement. Displacement because it's kind of 13-year-old high school level of understanding, and then you could have human displacement index, tax displacement index. I can't think of it anymore, but basically, even software displacement index, because this is replacing this many softwares. So you have the same number, which is how many. A good example: your number, say 4,000 people at Amazon. Say they're actually white collar jobs. Mm-hmm. So that's displaced this much tax, this many humans, 4,000, this much tax, and displaced this much software. I'm going to make it up and say, on average, people have 25 apps. Sometimes 50, they reckon, in enterprise, but say they've got 25. So this is replaced, basically, so displaced 4,000 people, I'll make up a number, displaced, let's just say, £4 million worth of tax, and displaced basically 25 times 4,000, 100,000 apps. which has displaced 100,000 apps times, I don't know, £20 month subscription, which is roughly 2 million, which has displaced 24 million worth of SaaS sales. Actually, it's not all literally is made on the fly, but people can follow the numbers-ish, and then they think, yeah, of course, even if he's off by an order of magnitude, yeah, okay, they didn't have 25 apps, they had like 10 each or 50 each. Okay, you do the math yourself. When you get the audience doing their own math, that's gold.
Yeah, the underlying message is trying to understand what the human cost of automation is. Okay, broadly speaking. So I has that as a statement, as the origin, right? When I was in there, I was listening to people talk about Accenture, going, what does this happen to my job? And I was going, so if everybody's asking this, that means everybody's scared about what's actually happening in their job. So if everybody I was literally in the room counting it. I was like, I think it was an audience of about 50 people. I was like, if everybody in here lost their jobs, you know, the cost of that, extrapolating, what does that look like? And I kind of wrote that down in a notebook. And then when I was building this, I really looked at it and went, what is the human cost of automation? And it's not just about jobs. It's about the job. If you lose a job, what does that do? You know, as you say, and you could literally translate it to, this is how many receipts Netflix loses.
Yeah.
You know, I don't care about that, because Netflix have got enough money, you know, but it makes sense to people, you know?
Yeah. You have to translate the cold number to maybe number that one of the two numbers that may affect them. Government tax, then the software industry, like, you know, actually it's 100,000 licenses, shit. And then to each one, but they provide talking points. But I think the tax is interesting because people kind of get it, but all the others are interesting as well, but it gives you an impact. But what you've done is probably, I think, enough. If you can do more, great, but enough to basically extrapolate and to have conversation after conversation after conversation about.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, mate. This conversation has been really valuable for me to sort of understand, because sometimes it's difficult, right? I'm in an echo chamber of one. In my office, you know, and you're similar in terms of working on your own, kind of diving through this sort of stuff, and it's trying to make sure, actually, am I being objective enough? Because I'm trying to be impartial.
Yeah,
I'm trying my best to go, look, I don't have a horse in the race. I do. My horse in the race is the humans. I care about people and what happens to us, and you know, and it's not just about jobs. It's about everything else that ties into it. So talking about you in this way and go, actually, you're right. How do I represent this in a way that has that? What does that really mean? Because most people aren't, mate. I've got sources on there, but I'd be very surprised if anybody ever clicks on the sources and really verifies that sort of stuff.
No, because they're looking for a narrative. You're looking for, even if you were off by double the amount, it'd be like, well, yeah, it's indicative. Yeah, it's 94. Okay, it's 40, 47. Okay, who cares? It's a number. And I think that's the kind of thing, like when people say they're going to save 5 billion or they're trying to cut the welfare. Okay, so what does that actually mean? And so there was a cop, I listened to LBC today, and you know, Sadiq Khan turned down Palantir, or said he can't do Palantir.
Yeah.
So the coppers are very keen to have it. And my son was in the car because I'd taken him to the orthodontist, and he was saying, what's this about, Dad? And goes, well, Palantir is a really good surveillance company. And so once they get in, I mean, as I say, even if you liked the management, look at the US presidency, managements change all the time, even if it's over 4 or 8 years. So you might like the current management, but they change. So it doesn't matter. You don't want to be that entwined. Look at our nuclear kind of stack entwined with America. So I said, well, Palantir is a bit troublesome because it's entwined with someone who is currently deemed unsavory, what says in 4 to 8 years. And then the policeman's saying, oh, we're going to have to lay off this many people because we haven't got Palantir. And I said, are you telling me that someone in the UK can't do surveillance tech? I think they can. We're pretty damn good at cyber. So if you give some money, gave 10 startups, 10 million each, yeah, maybe 2 make it, great. They're going to easily be able to copy without infringing on what's been done. Because it's simple. It's not simple. But where we are with AI now, some of the stuff they did many years ago wouldn't be valuable without the AI. They built this whole layer. We talked about ontology and all that sort of stuff. Now everybody's seen it. Yeah, the guys coming out of Oxbridge and Cambridge could do that easily.
Exactly. I mean, this is something we should note down and talk about this, because I think deeply about this, about DeepMind. DeepMind was a UK business,
yeah,
right? And Look, whether DeepMind would still exist and be capable of doing all those things without Google's deep pockets is another thing, right? But DeepMind is no longer a UK business; it's an American-owned business now, right? But we had one of the brightest minds working in this country, doing brilliant things, frontier-wise in the AI, and we massively dropped the ball here in not investing not only capital but attention to it, and also looking at it and go, how do we duplicate that in different ways? And you're right, mate. You're so right in saying this, right? The easy thing to do is to invite an established business, be it US, China, whatever, into the country and allow it to do this. But when it's at the security of its people, health data of its people, etc., it's mental that we've not gone, wait a minute, could we not just deploy that? Because we've got talented individuals, mate.
It's a database, man. It's a database with AI tools on top. How hard is it? And so I went into that. He goes, I shouldn't have asked that this. So I went into it and said, do you know outside of China, we're the most surveilled country?
No.
I didn't know that. We are. Basically, we've got like in some areas up to like 78% surveillance.
Well, Nottingham is the pilot place on this, incidentally. But yeah, go on.
Yeah.
Go on.
So I would say, okay, that's pretty good. So we could link up some of those cameras, and again, that technology is there. So I said, we don't need to invite these. So you got me onto another subject, which is when people talk about nationalism and talk about, oh, don't want Chinese people, don't want black people. No. Fine if you get rid of all of us, but then don't keep any US company here. So let's start with the US companies first, or the British companies replacing the US, because literally there is very few bits of tech that isn't just a database developed, which easily developed by a UK person could develop a database with AI on top.
Especially now with what's mate, the stuff that you can open sourcely access on things like GitHub, right, is incredible. And like if you can dream it, you can do it. And the government isn't shy of money, mate. If they can, the contract that they were talking to Palantir about, Palantir isn't. Actually, I'm going to stop. But the money that the values that they're talking about there for this business is small fry.
Yeah.
Isn't it? It's small fry for them.
Totally.
Yeah. So, but for you say, let's assume Oxbridge, brilliant scientist of mine. Well, it doesn't even need to be that. Any beautiful, incredible individual here. And through my volunteering work, I've met some incredibly bright engineers. And I see their CVs, Gary, and I'm going, Jesus Christ, why are you listening to me? I'm dumb as hell. You guys are so clever.
Exactly.
We should be investing in these people and ensuring that we build that. As I keep saying, when I looked at DeepMind, mate, and you really read into it, you go, that's one of the saddest things that happened, man. I get why he made that decision, right? I get why that decision was made for this sort of stuff. But it was sad that we didn't fight more for it.
Well, that comes back to my bugbear, the Bank of England. We don't have any appetite for risk capital. And it's not because the banks, it's back to your point earlier, the banks will do whatever they're incentivized to do. They're incentivized not to lend to risky Man or Gary or DeepMind, because that is risk capital. And we don't do risk capital. We do collateralized capital. And the only collateral really is valuable is land. And therefore, land and buildings and stuff. And therefore, we get and buying gilts. UK government kind of bonds. So when the regulator gives me capital ratings are very low for buying their bonds, for buying maybe EU bonds, and for putting lending money against basically land and buildings, well, mate, my job is to maximize return on capital. That is it. So when that's that's my job, literally.
And this is exactly my point about the correlation of your point about the Bank of England is my bugbear, or the enemy, which is the system. Because when I started the coffee shop, we found a place in Hoxton, and it was a rundown chicken shop, mate. It had
I went there. I remember I saw you there.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was run down. No one was in it. They changed hands 4 or 5 times. Right. It's one of those things that never worked.
Yeah.
It had issues all over the place with it, mate. And it requires investment.
Yeah.
It requires someone who could take that risk, right? to complete. So I raised a little bit of money through an angel, obviously my own savings, my business partner's savings. We went in on this, etc., and it was still not enough, right? We needed an extra capital for staff and all that sort of stuff, right? Because it's a big undertaking, right? We had to bring it up to speed, do all the compliances, etc., and obviously pay ourselves. To get that additional capital, mate, I went to the bank, right? The only way I could borrow money, mate, was getting a second charge on my own home.
Exactly.
It's like this is nonsense.
That's the point, man. That's the point, yeah. Because that's
You know,
because they're incented to do that, because it wasn't always that way. But it has been that way since pre-GFC, actually, probably about the late 90s. It became that way, and that's it, because all capital then moved around globally and stuff. And so you see it with the lack of investment in the green energy, even the railway, the bullshit, the way they did that. All of these things really talk to the same thing, which is we are displacing one thing for another thing. We are happy to displace certain types of industry because we want other types of service industries in there, and we can just screw people over in Chesterfield or wherever, or Mansfield. They can get sucked out. And so all of this allows us to get animated, which is most important. People like to see animated, and also, but bring it back to, this is displacement. I can send this out. You could send the thing out pretty much every day if you really wanted to, with one or two tweaks or whatever, and each story relates to displacement. Like, so Meta yesterday said we're going to do this, I don't know, 1,500 people or whatever, they're going to train to do something, I don't know, something to do with. So that's a positive displacement story, because they're going to train people like AI or whatever. Then there's other displacement stories of, well, actually, I've heard about this data center is going to immiserate everybody in the town, but actually we're going to employ 3 people. Sounds like sometimes tongue-in-cheek or whatever, but essentially displacement I like displacement because it has a fixed element, body of water being displaced. I don't know, there's a lot to it that you can read into it from a kind of cerebral point of view. And also people say, yeah, okay, I was displaced. People think they're being displaced by foreigners here.
Well, exactly, and I think subconsciously, that was the kind of decision-making process in my mind about, I needed, I don't want to, layoffs, as I said, layoffs.fyi is a brilliant site, and I'm not, this is not homage to them, and I'm certainly not to look to displace them in terms of their work, right? Because they track everything, so much value on there. People should continue to use it. But the idea of displacement was, this is very specific. I was trying to say about AI and how it effectively made the visual is a bot coming in or whatever it is, nudging you, and you getting further and further, closer to the door. That's what's actually happening. And once you're out that door, you become that number. And now in this conversation is like, okay, how do we get people to see beyond that number? And it's almost like you want a tab here on my thing where you can play a game. One person equals this many, whatever it is. Packets of this, yada yada for that, and then if you extrapolate that over 1,000 people, as you say, this is how much tax receipt is, and and make it make sense to people. You can buy Erling Haaland, something like that, or whatever it might be.
Somehow there has to be money showed or something, but yeah, something like that. I think you have something, mate, and I think you have something which you could invite people on and talk about whether they've been displaced, those personal stories, but also just some of the wider impacts of software being displaced. And rightly or wrongly, that has people who work in software as well. I think you can definitely, with that knowledge you have, you can definitely work it.
Thanks, mate. When I get some more granular insight, I just need to track it somehow with the types of jobs.
Yeah,
we should connect yours stock price ticker to it, mate.
Yes.
I love that idea. I think it's phenomenal. Very simple to see the value of, particularly if you're doing that job, and mate, and if you don't agree with the value, that's the point of it.
You want an argument.
You're overvaluing me here, mate. I hadn't realized this. I was talking to my wife about FDEs, and like, they've been hiring them. I'm going, right.
Really?
And in their business, and the value of these things. I'm like,
no.
Woo!
Yeah, we'll talk again about FDEs because on the positive side of them, me hiring, but on the other side of what we talked about earlier, that now you've got a bunch of people running around all playing a different game because they've all got different tools and stuff. It's going to create chaos in the organisation. But yeah, but either way, it'd be a good place to.
And that's the ones that are being honest about using AI. There are a lot of people who are using it who aren't talking about it as well, which is another conversation which I find really interesting as well. You know, it's funny, mate. It's funny, you know. And anyway, that's a point for another day, mate.
Okay, hopefully it's recorded. Anyway, that was a good intro to see that, because the idea is, if this works, there's quite a lot of people on Substack that you'd be able to just invite in. So basically, if you look at what makes good content and what makes a good kind of show, yeah, the long form's good. Diary of a Chief Executive, whatever it's called, is interesting. But even more interesting is when, imagine if you had a show and you just invite someone on and you say, well, just join Substack. So Substack are happy with you because you're getting people to join Substack. It's like, take 2 minutes. And they just jump on. And they just got a 6-minute segment. And then you have someone else, they come on and whatever. And you just invite different people. And I think you can get as many as 4, maybe I've seen even 8 people on this type scenario. And you're running it then like almost like it's not a chat show per se or radio show, but without doing much work, you can just schedule these people to call up or whatever, and they can just on the phone. You say, okay, someone's coming on, and it's real low fidelity stuff,
but it's real.
Yeah,
it's real.
It's real, and it's quite, because I thought I should really get into this because there's so many people I read on Substack that I really want to tap up, but they're like, "Who are you?" I want to say, "Let's come on 6 minutes, just talk about your article," because I thought it's fantastic. And then most will say, "No, get lost. Who the hell are you?" And a few might say, yeah, okay, well, it's low friction. I'll come up 6 minutes, 10 minutes.
But it's evergreen content, you know, and also, Gary, it's not a lot of work involved because you've got big. Because I find with look at Joe Rogan, mate. Yeah. Do you reckon he does a lot of research? He's just curious.
No research.
He's just curious. He's curious and he's opinionated.
Exactly.
You know, and you know, it's like the Navy SEAL guy. I can't remember his name.
Goggins, not Goggins.
No, not him.
I think I know that one. Yeah.
He just loves guns and yada yada, and he does do research. He's got a good team. But he's just super curious, mate, and it's just about, he just gets people on and goes, tell me about why you're doing what you're doing, you know, kind of. But when it comes to articles, so long as what's the work involved, mate? You reading the article?
I'm reading it anyway.
Exactly, and you're reading it anyway.
Totally. The articles are the new books, and if I look at what Hung Lee's done, which I think is brilliant in the space, he's another one I listen to every week. He basically says, I'm just going to go live every day. Is it every day or is it every Friday?
Yeah, mainly he just walks and talks, man.
He just says, I'm going to go live. I'm going to go live every Friday, and this is the topic. And that's it. I'm going to go live. And so we have enough for that. And now there's a massive audience but there's a massive cohort of people that are writing super intellectual stuff in your space, in my space. There's some super detailed stuff on the future of work, intelligence, this and tax and that. So would you invite me?
But it's interesting to get a contrarian view as well, I find, right? I like reading things from people and understand people's point of views that don't necessarily align or I agree with, because I want to make sure that I've got as much of a holistic picture as possible. And particularly when the world is, mate, there's no shortage of discussion points. There's nothing static, is there? I mean, I think there's a yearn for nostalgia, where people want to look back and just enjoy, like, let's pick the decade, 90s, let's say, where it was interesting but not crazy. It was just normal, mate, where there wasn't actually that much going on. You know, the biggest thing was going down to Blockbusters on a Saturday.
Yeah, true. Yeah, people are nostalgic for the old days. But I think you have something here, mate, and I think you could definitely, if you look around the app and if you see any articles, just tag their names and think these are people you can invite going forward. Obviously, okay. I'd happily jump on anytime, like regularly. But I think the trick is, man, and this is the hardest thing, is think, what could you do every single day, even in the airport, on the beach, in the airport, and anywhere. And if you look at the rest of politics, the US one, that geezer's anywhere. The Catty Kate, or Catty K, whatever. Sometimes she's in some random hotel room. Then she's in her daughter's room with some random curtains. She's just anywhere, and she's like a posh bird. She's literally, and then sometimes she's in like her homemade studio or whatever. And then the bloke's in. Sometimes he's in a Hortneck. Sometimes he's in this. Sometimes he's out on the street. They just say, "We're going to record," and I could be anywhere because they have a theme, which is what has Donald Trump done and what is the war doing.
And for them, mate, I mean, in some ways, I bet you they were like, oh, please don't let this president not run for a third term.
Because it would be exciting, yeah. But I think you have a theme for the next at least year. There's going to be more and more layoffs, more and more displacement of people, displacement of this, and that is a kind of touch point. People are being displaced by data centers because they can't live next door. There's all sorts of shit. So
that fluidity is interesting. Yeah, I need to have a look at that because I saw Erin Brockovich does that in the States. She's created a site for this, mate. It's by maps, right?
Yes.
I looked at that. I was talking to
really good. Yeah.
I was talking to ChatGPT. I was going, "Do we have one in the UK?" No. All right, great. Mark that down. Yeah. That's something we need to converse about as well and look at. Now, a lot of food for thought, mate. I appreciate it.
Cool, man. Okay, cool. We'll catch up, and I'll see how it looks on recording and maybe we can send it in clips and stuff. But either way, I think you have it. I think it's already there, mate. I don't think you need much more detail. I think we'll just work on how you can actually become a kind of polarizing character without being horrible.
Cheers, mate. Thanks a lot.
Okay,
good to see you, bud. Take care, Gary.
Bye-bye.
Bye, mate.
Careers are markets, every skill's a stock. Some rise like rockets, some die on the dock. Future's getting priced in faster every day. You either own the wave or get washed away.